Okay, now you're all set to go.
Great. Thank you, Vanessa. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you. This is Town of Southborough virtual meeting of the Personnel Board, Wednesday, November 2020, 12 p.m. I've been asked to read the following statement. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Personnel Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. And I should have noted that I gavelled us in with the stapler at exactly 12 p.m. before I read that statement. So I'm not going to read it again. I'll just go back in time. Then I read the statement. Okay. Second order of business after call to order is administrative business. This is section 2A of the agenda. We have 3 sets of minutes in the packet. September 23rd, October 14th, and then minutes from the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen from October 20th. All 3 sets of minutes having been distributed to the board in advance of this meeting, reading of the minutes is waived. Starting first with September 23rd, any board comments or edits? Chair seeing none. The minutes of September 23rd, 2020 are approved as presented in the packet. Moving to October 14th, 2020. Any comments from the board? Chair seeing none. The minutes of October 14th, 2020 are approved as presented in the packet. Moving to the last set of minutes, October 20th, 2020. Any comments from the board? The chair seeing no comments. The minutes are approved as presented in the board. Sorry, the minutes are approved as presented in the board packet. Thanks very much, everyone. Okay, now we're moving on to 2B. That's Bates number 9. This is the usual expense control report, expenditure ledger. It's dated November 4th, 2020. Anybody have any questions on this? Great. So Vanessa, I think this is a good time to talk to the board about the line item for consulting with Mark Way.
Sure.
So if you would like to summarize our conversation and then I can make a motion.
Yep. So after a conversation with the chair, I reached out to Mark Way, who did their performance evaluation training with the department heads. Actually, I think that was right before COVID. It seems a lot longer, but I think it was probably January or February. And at that time we had talked about having Mr. Way come back and do a session for chairs of committees who are evaluating some of our department heads. Of course, COVID hit and we were not able to do that. I checked in with Mr. Way last week and he is in process now to do some virtual training. He has done this before and his quote would be $400 for a 2-hour virtual training designed for boards and committee members rather.
Thank you, Vanessa. Are you done?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so after Vanessa let me know, we had discussed this. I sent out an email to my distribution list of board and committee chairs who have SAP employees, asked them to respond to me and Vanessa, told them that personnel board thought this training would be valuable for them. There's about 10 or 12 of them on the list. I haven't counted. And so far, I think we got, is it just the 3 responses, Vanessa?
3 so far, yes.
3 so far, but they were very positive. Mm-hmm. So I move that the board, and if you look at the expenditure ledger, we have two possible line items. One is 53020, management consulting professional, and the other one that's possible would be 53070, which is employee development. But I deem this more 53020, management consulting, because it's not strictly employee development. This would be a training for the citizen chairs of boards and committees with SAP employees. So not strictly an employee development. So I ask this board, I make a motion to approve engaging Mark Way to conduct a virtual training on performance evaluations for citizen chairs of boards and committees with SAP employees, not to exceed $400 from line item 53020, professional consulting.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, debate?
Nope.
You guys are easy. Oh, that sounds bad. Take that off the tape. You
We're
guys are very
flexible.
easy to work with.
We're flexible.
Flexible and reasonable. All right, so I'll vote. Oh, I also forgot to say that I'm getting too much in the habit of these virtual meetings. All votes today will be by roll call. Mr. Dietz on the present motion.
Approve, yes, however we want to say it.
Ms. Jasinski,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes.
and Ms. Rosenblum votes in the affirmative. Thank you all. And Vanessa, we can follow up offline to get that set up. I'll send a follow-up email. If I don't hear from anybody, we'll try to get a date that works. Hopefully, as Vanessa has said, easier to do a virtual training, get people on board for a virtual training. Okay, moving on to 3A, Chair Report. Just a brief follow-up from the joint meeting on October 20th. I did have a conversation with Mr. Purple and Mr. Healy, a telephone conversation on October 29th. We talked for approximately an hour. The topics included comparing the provisions of the town administrator bylaw, the personnel director section with the personnel bylaw. I thought it was a good first step. We didn't agree on everything. The bylaws overlapped somewhat, but I thought at the end of the day, in terms of who has the duty to maintain and administer the SAP, we agreed it was this board, that when Mr. Purple wears his personnel hat, he works with our guidance and oversight. Mr. Healy wanted my take on when Mr. Purple is acting as town administrator, outside personnel director, he often does have personnel responsibilities, and wanted to know if I considered that he had to report to us on those matters. And I said no. So to give an example, if there's a department within the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, Youth and Family Service, or something like that, if they wanted to add a position and it had budget consequences, would it be the position of the personnel board that they came to us and we could overrule anything Mr. Purple decided? And I said, absolutely not. For departments within the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, we would always ask if this is something that the town administrator and Board of Selectmen had signed on to, and we would not overrule that. Different story when it comes to a department outside the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, such as the library. If Mr. Donovan came to us and said he wanted to talk about a new position, we would say, has your board approved it? We wouldn't ask if he had discussed it with Mr. Purple and if it had been approved by the Board of Selectmen. So I think everybody was in agreement that that's the way it goes. Couple of items on communication. It was agreed by the three of us that the personnel director will give a monthly report to the personnel board at its meetings, and we'll start on that today. So that's great. And the last thing I wanted to touch on was this area of hiring, and we'll talk about this a little later in the meeting. I noted to Mr. Healy, and Mr. Purple knows this because we've discussed it in our meetings, sometimes this board is called upon to honor terms of a hiring letter that we had nothing to do with. But because the hiring letters for SAP employees involve SAP terms like vacation or whatnot, we're called, and I can probably remember a couple of recent examples where we are called upon to uphold something that we really had no notice of upstream. So it was agreed that if there's a pending offer, notice will be given to this board. And if there's something that we want to talk about in terms of an SAP matter before the offer is made, we can convene an emergency meeting. So Mr. Purple asked us if we would discuss that today and just give him a sense of whether, so it was agreed with Mr. Healy and Mr. Purple that if there is a pending offer and a letter in the works, notice will come to this board. But for discussion today, do the members here want that notice to go to the full board or, excuse me, just to the chair? And then I decide, do you want to empower me to decide? So I'm going to open that up. Everybody clear what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think I'd like to see it. And then if there's a question in my mind, I can bring it to your attention and you can, we can move forward on it. But I think seeing it would be helpful.
Okay. So I would not screen them on behalf of the board because chances are I'm going to want to ask somebody else anyway, a +1 at least. So Jay, Dorian, Dave, any thoughts on this?
I agree with Barry. I'd like to see it as well.
Yeah, I agree also.
Okay, so Mark, understood?
Well, I have a different suggestion, and that may dovetail into this because I've been having some conversations with Mrs. Hale about the hiring process to begin with, and the ones that we have involvement in. I would not be opposed to having a personnel board member involved at some level of the hiring, whether it's whether it's in the first couple of rounds or whether it's sometime earlier when it comes to reviewing of candidates. I think that probably would be a better time to identify, because I think really the big issue that would come up regarding SAP and personnel board approval is going to be that third week of vacation, depending on municipal experience. And I think some of those things can be identified early on, so that we're not requiring personnel board to call an emergency meeting or call something in order to get that approval, so that we make sure that we don't make an offer that includes something that has not yet been approved. And as the chair said, put the board in a position of feeling like you have to do this because otherwise the candidate that we have on board may decide they don't want to come. This was a deal breaker for them. So I'm fine with the first piece, Madam Chair, but I also put that out there for some consideration. We are going to have some hirings coming up. I'll speak to those in a couple of minutes, but that's, I know it's not on the agenda, but it's just something else for consideration moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Purple. I do have a reaction to that, but I'll take input from the board first. Anybody?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, anybody else?
I agree. I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
Works for me.
Okay. At present, I would like to deal with the item that's on the agenda first, put it into place, because I think the role of the personnel board in hiring is a little bit of a bigger discussion. So as Mark said, vacation was one area. The other area is now going to be passed because it related to a probationary salary review. But I want this in place for the things that I don't know might come up. If you had told me that we would have a misinterpretation of the vacation provision that we had a couple years ago, I would have told you no, because it's clear. So clearly there are places where I think the SAP is clear. Board members may think it's clear, but it obviously has been interpreted in a different way. So for now, I would like the board to give Mr. Purple the guidance that when hiring offers are, when he's at the stage that he's ready to put something in writing, to please shoot that to the board. And then I would like to.
Before the offer is made, correct?
Yeah, so don't send a hiring letter. So we sent out to Melissa so-and-so, sorry, I
Yeah.
shouldn't use anybody's name. Karen, we sent Karen an offer this morning and she accepted. What do you think of it? How about we're getting ready to
Yep.
send Karen a letter. Here's the terms. Please review it for SAP and shoot that to all of us,
Yep.
okay? And then the only thing is I don't want anybody on the board, because of open meeting law, to send back don't hit reply all. I think you all know that. Hit reply to Mark or Vanessa, who's ever on it, and me. So then I'll know if there's an issue, you want to schedule a meeting. Okay. It might be as simple as a board member noting something and then Mark agrees to change it. I imagine the having to have a meeting would be for a big disagreement, and I don't think that's going to happen because this board is usually in agreement about how to interpret things like the vacation provisions. In terms of the role of the board in hiring, I know that in the past, Mr. Milholland had an unofficial role in hiring as a member of personnel board, but it wasn't really brought into open meeting. My concern is a member of this board participating in something that isn't done fully as part of open meeting. The other thing, it was suggested to me by a few folks that it's a conflict, it may be a conflict of interest for a member of this board to participate in hiring someone and then be called upon to take an action with respect to that person. I've never decided if I think that's true or not. I'll have to get some of the great legal minds on that one. The last piece is we're not really part of the hiring process by the bylaw. That's not the mission of the board. And those of you who have worked with me know I take that mission pretty seriously and I want to keep it defined to what it is. I am not someone who would jump to increase the role of the board into an area that the statute doesn't have us in. So if someone wants to point out to me where in the bylaw or want to change the bylaw. So in short, for now, I'd like to give you, Mr. Purple, the direction that we discussed with Mr. Healy, and then open it up to the board to discuss a bigger role in hiring. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of comments. I guess I don't see a conflict of interest. I mean, it's quite common for managers, for example, to be involved in the hiring process, also to be doing performance evaluations, to be recommending increases, to be disciplining the employees they hired. So I don't think the fact that we play a role in that creates a conflict with our doing other things. And on the other point, I guess my view would be to the extent that the town, Mark, whatever, wanted to call upon someone who happened to be on this board to participate in the hiring of someone. To me, it's not in their capacity as a member of this board. It's the fact that they may have a particular background that would be helpful in the process. So they're not there as representatives of the personnel board, but as individuals who have certain background expertise, experience that Mark might think might be helpful in the hiring process.
Thank you for your perspective, Barry. So we'd be talking about a case where, Mark, you would tap somebody with expertise, but they wouldn't report back to the personnel board about it. It wouldn't be part of this notice of conditions. For example, say Barry was tapped to be on a search committee for a new employee. This whole idea that personnel board reviews the hiring letter, would it be your expectation, Mark, that Barry would speak for the personnel board and that the fact that he's involved means it's all kosher with the whole board, or would we still get notice to the board?
You would still get notice. This is a separate and distinct piece from what we're talking about. I don't, and I'd let Vanessa speak to, you know, I don't know that Russ was involved as a personnel board member, in as much that I think as Barry explained it, he probably put it better than I'm trying to, that Russ's experience in human resources and everything in that was more the reason he was chosen for a lot of these search roles, but Vanessa could speak to that.
I tried to get definition about it from him and just never could. So thank you, Mr. Purple. That's
Yeah.
helpful. So can we agree moving forward, Mr. Purple or Ms. Hale as his delegatee will give the board notice via email before the letter goes out with the terms?
Yes,
And the board members can review it. Are we all in agreement? I don't think we need a vote on that. I think that's just the sense of the board of a direction to Mr. Purple. And then
perfect.
if we could, we can have a discussion about hiring process when we get down to B3 in a minute, where we're going to talk to Vanessa about the hiring process. Does that sound good? Okay. Moving on. Okay, so I think that was it in terms of my discussion with Mr. Purple and Mr. Healy. We didn't get in the hour that that Mr. Healy had available. We didn't get to everything. Like I said, it was a good start, and I thank everybody who participated and for this board for attending the joint meeting. And I'll keep you posted. We're hoping to have a second conversation subject to Mr. Healy and Mr. Purple's schedule, and that hasn't been scheduled yet. Okay, moving on to 3B, we have 1 Personnel Director report. Mr. Purple, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add on to your comments about the call, I thought it was a great phone call. We did talk a lot about silos, I think, in terms of how personnel is done, in town, which makes it difficult to do it consistently and effectively in some cases. But yes, good call, and there will be a sequel. We just need to find the time to schedule that. So 2 things I wanted to talk to you about today, both of them hiring pieces. The first piece, as the board is aware, Carol Ostrich, the administrative assistant in the Selectman's office, has announced her retirement. Her last official day in the office is November 30, but she is going to be using some vacation time. So her last official day is November 30. Her last official day in the office is actually tomorrow. So, she's been with us for just shy of 20 years. And, we're gonna miss that continuity and institutional knowledge and, and all the things that I think, that she's brought to the position. We're taking an opportunity to take a look at the position and see what we think we may do with it. Originally, it was a 40-hour position. Recently it was reduced to 34 hours, which meant that there were no late nights on Tuesdays and no Friday hours. So it was pretty much Monday through Thursday. And I don't think we would look to increase the hours back to 40. We're taking a look at potentially sharing the position and providing services to other departments who need assistance, and some of those departments who don't have admin, so that we can help with processing of bills and payroll and things of that nature. There is going to have to be a discussion by the Board of Selectmen as to how they want to structure this. It's going to be a difficult financial year. It seems like I say that every year, but it appears, that this year is going to be especially difficult, and COVID has not made it any easier. And so we'll be having a discussion with the selectmen sometime in December as to, what their thoughts are on the position. And at the same time, we're taking advantage of the fact that it's a good opportunity for us to review Mrs. Hale's job description and Mrs. Esposito's job description as Assistant Town Administrator and Executive Assistant to the Board of Selectmen, because I think that they need to be updated to more properly reflect the things that they're doing right now. And if we are shifting some of the responsibilities in the administrative assistant position, where do some of those other responsibilities go? So so at this point, there is nothing, for the personnel board to do. I need to see what the selectmen want to do, how they want to proceed. But I would assume that you are at least going to be seeing some new job descriptions or revised job descriptions for the assistant town administrator and the executive assistant in the selectman's office for review. And then we'll leave that to your determination as to whether they go through the JAQ process. Obviously I'll keep you posted as we go and discuss as to how this administrative assistant position is going to be handled, for fiscal 22 and moving forward. So I don't know if you have any questions on that.
I have one, but I'll open it up to the board. Thank you, Mr. Purple. Anybody have any questions on this aspect of the report?
Mark, are we gonna change the assistant town administrator's job description? Because we're gonna be adding some stuff to the new person who fills in for the executive assistant? Is that my understanding what you just said?
No, I think, I don't believe that the assistant town administrator's job description has been touched in quite a while.
Okay.
So I think it's a good, it would be delinquent if we changed and updated one position, but didn't touch these others that haven't been touched in a while. And I really think that we should take the opportunity to bring the entire office, everybody in the office, bring their job descriptions, up to snuff.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? I just have a question. Has there been any discussion, Mark, between the BOS, Ms. Haley, yourself, about bringing personnel board into the drafting of the revised job description for the ATA?
There is not,
Okay.
not to me.
Do you
Yeah.
think that would be appropriate, given, I don't know what percentage of Ms. Hale's time is spent supporting personnel board? That's been a perennial issue for me in terms of how often can I call upon her? Am I stepping on Board of Selectmen's toes?
Yeah.
That I think 2 years ago, you and I agreed every time I asked Vanessa to do something, I will copy you on it so you can see the workflow. It hasn't been an issue lately, but believe me, there's plenty of things I'm sure we'd like to have her do. So imagine her revised job description is going to include responsibilities for this board. So I personally think it would be appropriate for the board to be involved in the process. Anybody else have a?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that it obviously is going to include personnel, board responsibilities. And I think that, the interesting part about that, Madam Chair, is that, it changes her responsibilities change with each chair as to what she does, how she does. So, she's not doing the minutes right now. That's something that is being undertaken elsewhere. There are certain things that she would do that she doesn't do. So the question is, do you update those responsibilities based on the now? Or do you anticipate, or do you say that these generally are the responsibilities and there may be some fluctuation, some ebb and flow depending on, what direction, the board is going in or who is driving the bus?
Ideally, I'd like to see a job description that spells out in a paragraph responsibilities to the personnel board may include doing
Yep.
the minutes,
Yep.
may or may not include doing the minutes,
Yep.
responding to requests, attending the meetings.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, I think Vanessa's been at every board meeting I've been at. That hasn't changed. When something because board composition changes, we have a short history. If I had a nickel for every time I said, Vanessa, how have we done this over the last 20 years? So that remains the same. Correct. Minutes, I'm doing the minutes now. But a lot of this remains consistent in terms of her counsel and then various research projects she does, the municipal contacts. I would be happy to participate, or maybe somebody, I don't want to jump in, somebody else on the board with HR expertise. Mr. Dietz has been on the board almost as long as I have. He knows what Vanessa does for us. Maybe he and I could work together. Oh, see how smooth that was, Jay? I just volunteered you to do another job description.
Do you notice how Jay just sat back all of a sudden when you volunteered him?
Kind of tried to disappear. So,
But no, Betsy, I think we're on the same page. I think
Okay.
they need to be specific enough to delineate the things that, you should be doing, but broad enough so that, it can include things by reference that may not specifically be mentioned. So I agree.
we have other SAP employees who work for citizen boards, and I'm sure those change over time with different chairs. Some are more active, some are less active, some are more demanding, some are less demanding. I don't think it would be hard to craft that paragraph. So that, you know, if Miss Hale retires, what am I supposed to say? Wins the lottery. When Miss Hale wins the lottery and you have to fill her position, the new hire says, what? You didn't tell me I was going to have to do minutes. I hate doing minutes.
Yep.
And, you know, 6 years from now, the ATA is doing minutes.
Yep.
But I don't actually think the ATA should do minutes. I think there are better uses for a reasonably high paid professional than doing minutes. I think when I retire, we'll probably move to the professional minute taker mode that a lot of boards and committees have, but that aside. So Jay, I just volunteered you and me to take a pass at. And if you'd like to
That's
invite
fine.
us to do it, I think Jay and I could get together and send you some draft language.
Yeah, send it
I
over.
have it. Yep, I have it down in my notes. So,
Okay.
You know, when we get to that point where, you know, we've got a solid draft, you know, I will forward you and Jay a copy so that you can, you know, you can provide your thoughts, or we can do one of these Zoom meetings. You know,
I
and
think
do
I
something
could
like
get
that.
to, oh, sorry, Mark, didn't.
Nope.
I think nobody's in a better position to know what the board asked Vanessa to do than me and Vanessa and Jay, who's
Right.
drafter.
Okay.
So I don't see why I couldn't brainstorm with Vanessa, just she missed something, I missed something. And then I could talk to Jay about it and send you some language.
I'm happy to not be involved in the weeds on that if
Okay.
that's the I've got plenty of other things to do. So
Gotcha.
I would appreciate that. I think that input would be helpful.
Great. So we'll get going on that. Again, I can do that offline with Vanessa. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Mark. And please continue. Is everybody done with the selectman's office reorg? And did you want to move on?
Yes. So I had one other issue. This one's a little more interesting. And again, you know, I'm talking about two personnel issues that, you know, you may see a part of or you may not see anything of. The other issue, obviously you've likely heard that our IT manager, Tom LaFlame, has submitted his resignation effective the end of next week. Tom is moving on to another position, a similar position in another municipality, closer to home. And you know, like I said, you can't put a value on proximity, and you know, I tried, but you know, the only way that I can make it better is if I move the town 30 miles north, and I can't do that. So, you know, we're really going to miss Tom, and we've taken two tracks on this right now. The first is advertising for a replacement for basically a new Tom, for a new IT manager. And we have gotten, I think, about a dozen resumes or so in at this point. I've not looked at them. My understanding is that there's a handful of them that have municipal experience in the IT departments, some as managers, some as number two. So we do appear to have an interesting crop. I know that Mrs. Hale has taken a look at other municipalities that are looking for IT managers, similar IT positions right now. And, you know, our salary is probably right in the midpoint of where some of these other towns are hiring at. So I think that, you know, it'll make us competitive because these are bigger towns. So I think that, you know, we could get a quality candidate. The other track I'm looking at, and we've done this a couple of times with regards to facilities as well as IT, is to look at whether we can consolidate operations with the school department. And the times that we've looked at this over the past 5 or 6 years, the answer has previously been, we all agree it's a good idea, but the problem is that the timing just doesn't work for one reason or another. And in this particular situation, we're getting a little bit more traction. I think that there's a little more commonality. The school department has a manager, and then they have an assistant manager, and then they have a number of employees who are the technicians. And so there's been some discussion with the superintendent and with the IT management on the school side. I know that Tom and the IT managers from the school have taken a trip around the town facilities to fully understand what our IT needs are and what they would be supporting. And then they'll be making a recommendation to the superintendent. The IT managers for the school will make a recommendation to the superintendent. If we were to move forward and to do this, this is what we would need for additional staffing, and how does that play into the money that we would have, and what path forward would it be at that point? Would the school be doing the hiring? Which is why I say that this may not even be a personnel board issue if this moves completely to a school operation. If we're doing the hiring and the school is managing, we're talking about hiring a different employee than an IT manager. It's a lesser position. It'll be more of a technician, which we don't have in the SAP. And I don't want to have the board have to take a look at trying to fit this position into another position until we can fix the position. So we would need to talk about a strategy as to what we would need to do within the SAP bylaw to make this happen. I'm hoping to have some more clarity on this sometime in the next week. Again, we're moving on 2 tracks. I didn't want to just try the consolidation option and then 2 weeks down the road, 3 weeks down the road, find out that's not going to work. And now I'm 3 weeks behind on a hiring process when the manager is already leaving. I also, as a bridge, the school has agreed to help us in the bridge period, whether we go to a new Tom or whether we go to a consolidated approach with the school. So we are going to have IT coverage, in that bridge period. Again, that's something in process right now. That's where I am. That's the most up-to-date information. I am talking with, Municipal Technology Committee has asked, if there's anything they can do. If we are going to keep the IT manager position, I'll probably involve one of them in the review process of resumes or, first round of interviews to help us screen candidates. So that's kind of where we are with that. I don't know if you have any questions on that position.
Can't we just move him here instead of moving the town 30 miles?
Yeah.
Buy him a house, put him in town.
Look, I take this one a little personally, Dorian, and I don't mean that he's leaving because of me. I mean that
I know.
when I came here, and Vanessa, I know it's at least 20, maybe it's closer to 25. The town had a contracted service for IT, and they would come in a day a week, maybe 2 days a week. We'd stack up, requests from departments for services. And I just, you were hearing from departments that there was more complaining, it wasn't working. And, I decided to push forward with the step to bring in IT underneath, as a staff position in the town. And I think everyone agrees it was probably one of the better decisions we made. Tom was our first, you never forget your first. And he's just been a great combination of technical skill and customer service. And I've dealt with a lot of IT people, and you always get the great technical skill, but sometimes it's really tough for them to do that customer service piece well. And Tom has got the ability to do both. And, he's been very good at what he does. And, I wish him all the best, but it doesn't make me any happier, or any easier for the fact that he's leaving.
Yeah, he's just a super person. I mean, I just really have a lot of respect for him, and I really enjoy working with him. So it's a huge loss for the town. So that's what I'm saying. Let's buy him a house and move him here.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Purple?
Yeah, I would just, if the individual ends up being hired by the school committee, I would want to make very clear and maybe have something in writing about the responsibilities of that individual. Because if the individual is hired by the school, managed by the school, when the town needs something done, what's that employee's priority going to be? So I think you need to make that pretty clear at the outset, but I'm sure
I think as part of the process, I've already envisioned in my conversations with the superintendent that the Board of Selectmen and the Southborough School Committee are going to need to do an MOU, excuse me, which lays out exactly what you're saying. Here's what we're doing. here's the services you're going to provide. You're going to assign, one employee, to handle everything we need. That's our contact person. The manager that he answers to is this person. And, and obviously if there's additional things that we need beyond this person, then resources need to be shifted to help us. And we understand that, that it goes both ways, but no, absolutely. This is not something we do on a handshake and an email.
Anybody else? All right, Mr. Purple, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I echo the sentiments. Mr. Laflamme was able to explain things to me and effectuate. So that speaks for itself. I'm the test. Are you smarter than a third grader on technology? I am not. So he will be missed. And thank you for your report. Anything else for us today?
No, I think that's it unless something pops up, but I will chime in.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to 3B, we have 3B2, we have a notice of new hires and departures. This is page 10 in the packet. So you'll note the format is a little different now. It's now section 9D, and Ms. Hale is reporting on appointments and on resignations. And this was a change in the SAP effective July 1st. So Vanessa, I turn it over to you for the report on hiring and departure.
Sure. Pardon me if I keep looking away. I have my packet up on my other laptop here at home. But we are losing Robin Richards, who has resigned as a part-time dispatcher. She's actually going to work full-time in another municipality. So congratulations to her. Of course, we've just talked about Tom, and we've also spoken about Carol, whose last day is tomorrow. And we have recently appointed John Terranova as a full-time communications officer. So he was a part-time person and now he's shifting to a full-time person. So that is our report for this month.
I just had a question, Vanessa. We have thank you very much for the report. This is great. We have Mr. Terranova as Schedule C Grade 3, but that's part-time. And you said he's full-time. So where is that?
So that's not in the SAP.
Okay.
That is, the dispatchers actually have their own collective bargaining agreement now. So he
Yep.
will now fall under that union contract.
All right. So thank you very much for that. I had forgotten
Sure.
that piece, and thank you. All right, B3, hiring process overview. You have a memo in your packet, pages 11 and 12. This was something I had talked to Vanessa about a couple months ago when we started to talk about the board getting a little more involved and knowing what's going to happen with hiring. And I asked Vanessa to put down the process, and this is the result. And Ms. Hepp, you have the floor if you want to
Sure.
talk about your memo.
Sure, certainly. Yeah, and we've had a number of conversations recently along with members of the Board of Selectmen. So I thought it would be a good idea to sort of lay everything out in writing here for discussion purposes. So as was noted earlier, the recruitment process is basically split by union contracts and SAP, as well as appoint under the jurisdiction of appointed officials and elected officials. So I do not get that involved in the appointments of elected officials. Say, for example, the town clerk's department. He generally does, his own hiring. Of course, he had to assist, any board or committee member or department head, but that's sort of the distinction between elected and appointed, as well as union and non-union. The town administrator has a little bit more of a role when it comes to hiring in the police department. The fire department and the Department of Public Works are both, they are their own hiring authority. That's part of their role and their job description with our fire chief and our DPW director. But I advise them, as needed, when they need assistance. So, again, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we do hiring right now. It's where we a number of years ago, we started using an applicant tracking system. So that's really helped cut down on, the labor and the paperwork and certainly the postage. We do so much more by email now. the applicant tracking system automates, a huge amount of that workload, thanking someone for applying, helping design questions, helping score applicants as they come in with whoever might be serving on our interview panel. As far as the interview panels go, I'll talk a little bit about Mr. Milholland. From the time I came here in October of 2000, I was the first person in this role. So Janice Conlon was basically doing all the hiring, prior to that as part of the rest of all her duties, and she really got a lot of help from Russ Milholland, who was at that time still, he had not retired, of course, back then. He was still working full time as an HR director for a large corporation in Worcester. So he really helped Janice with a lot of those department head recruitments. And I think over time, that just became sort of, the habit that Russ would be the chair of a lot of our interview panel committees. In some cases, the Board of Selectmen do appoint an actual ad hoc committee that generally has been restricted to when we are hiring a new town administrator, a new fire chief, or a new police chief. Other recruitments have been sort of more informal with, different folks participating in interview panel. Most of the time that still included Russ many times. It would include myself. It might include, another sort of like department. When we were hiring a town accountant, certainly Brian Ballantyne would be a little bit more involved in that one. We also, over the past, over my tenure at least, have often sought the advice and support of, a peer in another community. A rec director from Needham helped us at one time. The facility director in Shrewsbury was on that panel when we first hired Basilio Diaz. So those were some examples of bringing in expertise from another community to help us with the more technical aspect of the interviewing process. So that's kind of how our interview panels have worked. And then in the latter half of the memo, I just sort of laid out a bunch of bullets, which is, I was trying to think of, my beginning to end of our recruitment process. So I hope that information has been helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
So I just had a question, Vanessa. Thank you very much for the presentation and for the written material. The list of steps, so that would generally be for departments within the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, correct? Okay.
Yes.
And then you've noted that for independent, the elected boards, you're available to them at their discretion.
Correct.
Okay. So for example, a couple of years ago or a year ago, when we hired a new recreation director, would that have followed the in jurisdiction of BOS, or was that handled by the Recreation Commission?
Actually, a little bit of both. Certainly the Recreation Commission is appointed by the Board of Selectmen, so that fell more within this model, as I said.
So appointed boards versus elected.
Correct.
Okay.
In that case, we always look to have, if possible, a board member or a committee member as part of the process. With that particular one, it was Don Dumont and Jen Hansen were involved when we recruited Mr. Davis. So at different levels, first round, second round, and then of course that commission would be doing the final interview in a public meeting.
So that's just a good reminder that it's not just about boards, thinking about boards and chairs, but the appointed versus the elected.
Correct.
So really the only ones that are wholly independent would be Jim Haggerty and the town clerks, planning board, Board of Health. So any elected board.
Right. There are some.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say your involvement with elected boards then. And thanks for clarifying. Rec was a bad example. So if library were hiring, you would be there to assist, but not to do necessarily. Would it go through the applicant tracking system?
If I were involved in the recruitment, yes, it would go through the tracking system, because I think that's the most efficient way for everyone to see everything, all the information at once, and, avoid making, these large, printed packets of resumes and so forth. So if requested by the elected board, I might be a little bit more involved. I think I'm on my 5th town planner. So Don Morris and I have spent lots of time together over the years. So, they are one board that both, when Charlie Gaffney was the chair and of course, Don Morris as the current chair, they've always come to us for, more support perhaps than others. So it's at the discretion of the elected board.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Anybody else questions for Vanessa?
I have a couple. So who handles, for the ones that you're involved with, are you handling any paperwork, putting aside the resumes, but any paperwork associated with the hiring process all the way up until, right before they start? So eligibility to work, insurance forms, that kind of thing. Who does that?
That's the part myself, Barry, and part Kristen Pasakane, who was our benefit and payroll coordinator. So we're both involved in the paperwork end.
Okay, and is there some kind of checklist somewhere of, for new hires, this is what we have to do?
Yes, Kristen has a checklist like that she uses internally.
Okay, and do managers have any sort of outline of what their responsibilities are in the process?
Not in writing. I'm just looking to Mark at the same time, not that you can tell right now, but I don't believe we have anything in our organization, in writing as far as the manager's role in the process.
Okay.
We do have, I will just say one other thing. We do have a hiring policy on the books. It is extremely outdated. Mark and I have been chatting recently with 2 members of the Board of Selectmen who are looking at a number of our policies. And, that is one area where, I would say we could much better define the role of the department head in the process, but it is a policy that is very outdated at the moment.
Okay, and lastly, so background checks are mentioned a couple of times. They're mentioned in your bullet points that you checked during the process, and then in the offer letter. And I think I may have talked to you about this before. The first time they mentioned, is that just checking former employers? What's involved in that piece?
So that would be doing a Corey check and a SORI check, and doing the employment reference check.
Okay, at what point are you doing the Corey check though?
Only on a finalist.
Okay, so someone who's already been offered, or where are we?
It would be, generally, we're doing that, just before we make an offer, but not to a group, not to more than one person, not to a group of semifinalists, only on the one person that we want to bring forward for final appointment.
Okay, and I think you told me you don't use an outside company to do background checks.
No, we don't. The only time we have done that in the past has been for a more senior department head, like a treasurer collector, or a police chief or a fire chief. The Corey policy is something we're trying to update and bring current. So that is something we're looking at currently.
Yeah, because it is risky to be looking at criminal information before you've made a decision to make an offer to someone. So you just want to be very careful about that.
Thank you.
That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Anybody else?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify something, Betsy, on the Recreation Commission selection of a director. Once the search committee had narrowed it down to 2 finalists, each of the finalists were interviewed separately by individual members of the Recreation Commission. So that was the process that was followed on that.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Hale on the memo? I don't have any substantive feedback for you, Ms. Hale, because I'm not a hiring person. I'm not an HR person. Wasn't the area of the law I was involved in. I'm more of the process person. So I see this, I think I discussed this with you and Mr. Purple, as educational, not only for this board, but also in terms of one of your roles of succession planning that was mentioned in your job description or in your performance evaluation. I can't remember, or perhaps both. And I don't know if it will be when that gets revised. If you were coming and you, I mean, you're an HR professional, you have your PhD in HR by reason of the last 20 years, but it's not one of your educational degrees, right?
Correct.
It's more practice. So you have a PhD in hiring because of 20 years in town. If you were new to the position and given this document, again, I'm not making a judgment about the document. I'm just a process person. And at the end of the day, I'd like to see something on file that's as complete as it could be. If you were handed this document as a new hire and said you're in charge of the hiring process, would this level of detail be enough for you, or would you want to take it to another level? Because I know I'm a very detailed person. I can always take something to the next level of detail. But some of Mr. Rubenstein's questions have made me realize that there's a lot embedded in some of these bullet points. For example, schedule halfway through your bulleted list, schedule interviews, draft interview questions, do reference and background checks, or guide department head if they're doing that themselves. Would it be your desire to maybe flesh this out a little bit more if you were doing a process that would serve as a succession document for the
Sure.
next ATA?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. And I think some of the things that I would do as part of fleshing that out is include a number of templates that could be attached to this, you know, like interview questions, like the release forms that we give to a person, you know, to do a reference check or background check. So there's a number of things that I think could be supplemental information that would help flesh this out.
Okay. So now, thank you for that. So as you develop this, if you want to continue to update it, or this was a great first step, if you looked at it as a final step, it's your work product, it's your final step. If you thought based on this discussion or anything else, you wanted to go back and flesh it out. Like I said, I'm not a good judge of that because I'm not an HR professional. I don't do hiring, and I can always make things more detailed. So my question now is to go back to the discussion that Mr. Purple started. If members of this board wish to get involved in the hiring process, and I think it was sense of Mr. Rubenstein and Mr. Nixon, I guess everybody except me opined that sounded like a good idea. So I guess maybe I said it didn't sound like a good idea because I don't want to be involved in hiring because I have no expertise and I don't really see that as my role on the board. So if we could talk a little bit about how that would work. Would members of the board simply want to put their hat in the ring and tell Mr. Purple to give them a call next time he wants to convene a group? Is everybody but me volunteering? And then would it have any accountability back to the board? And I think we discussed that it wouldn't. You would just be knowledgeable professionals who are participating in a town process. So I leave that to the members of the board. Go ahead.
Vanessa, you're already involved in the process. You can't volunteer for something you're already a part of.
Yeah, she's trying to drop out of the process.
Yeah, I know.
No, I guess my one follow-up question would be, you know, I'm always happy to have a board member involved, you know, having, you know, someone else's experience or expertise on an interview panel, you know, I think is always a good idea. My question is, as you begin to sort of deliberate on that, I see sort of two groups here. So I'm curious what level the board members might like to be involved in, just so I know going forward, you know, more than half of our staff is, you know, administrative or support professionals, you know, versus, you know, department head recruitment. So I would ask you to think about that as well. You know, if you were interested in being involved in the mid and lower level, that's totally fine with me. I just want to know that going forward. Or are you more interested in helping with, you know, recruitment and interview panels for a manager?
Well, I would first send this over to Mr. Purple to define what he's looking, because it was Mark's recommendation or suggestion that we look at this. So I'd open it up to him. What exactly are you looking for? And then board members can volunteer.
I mean, I think in general, there's a lot of value, obviously, in having, not as much as a board member, but a resident, who may use some of these services. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't put, Dave in the position of, doing a recreation process, or things like that, but I mean, there may be times that, it would be good to have, his expertise or his knowledge, of some of those things, if you've got another department, that may be applicable. So like I said, I mean, it would be, I guess I would be seeking also, what interest you may have, but it's going to be on a case by case. I can't, okay, Jay, tell me what you think you would want, what type of, what department you'd be interested in. I'm not looking for liaisons. I don't think, to set it up that way. It's like, look, we have a hiring, a vacancy in this position. We're going to be doing a hiring process. Here's the job description, what we're looking for, and see if, if a member wants to be involved, and has an interest in something that they can bring to the review process. Vanessa and I look at the same 20 resumes for a position, and we're like, okay, come up with your top 5. And usually 2 or 3 of the top 5 are the same. And she comes up with 2 that I threw in the B pile. And, why did you include these? Because I saw this that you didn't see. And then I'm the same thing for a couple that she didn't pick. And so, like I said, I think that, another set of eyes, another perspective, is always beneficial in these processes because, somebody sees something that everybody else doesn't see. And maybe that becomes very important, in how that person actually fits in the organization.
Thank you, Mr. Purple. That said, board members who commented when this came up, you still putting your resumes in the ring?
Well, I mean, for me, it's pretty separate from being a member of the Personnel Board. As Mark said, I'm a citizen of Southborough. Mark knows me. Mark knows all these people. He has to make an assessment in each case. Who do I think might be helpful in this process? So it has nothing to do with my being a member of the Personnel Board, at least as I see it.
Okay. I see it as something that is separate as well. So thank you for that, Barry. So I guess maybe where we leave this is the ask has been made. Any members of the board who wish to go into the pool of residents who are available can contact Mark and Vanessa separately. How does that work for everybody? Is that good?
Fine.
It sounds fine.
All right.
That works.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Appreciate it. Okay. The last piece is just Vanessa provided for us 2 letters. Thank you, Ms. Hale, in the packet at Bates 13 and 14. 13 is a sample of the hiring letter for those who are interested, since we're talking about hiring. And those who may get involved in the process may have comments about the letter. And then as members of the board, we will see such letters again when they get to a specific candidate.
I have a quick question on this.
On the letters, yeah.
Yeah, are we really making everybody go get a physical at an urgent care?
This was discussed before last year, Jay. Go ahead, Vanessa. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Full-time employees, yes. Part-time employees, it varies a little bit depending on, what department and how regular they are, or are they seasonal?
Why? But so why do we make full-time people get an actual, get a physical for their, does it need to have it for their job? Is it a job requirement for them to have a physical taken? Are we going to come back and if they say, oh, your physical showed that you have high blood pressure, we're going to now not offer you the job? So where's the cutoff on that? And how do you not get into a legal battle with somebody coming back saying, that has no bearing on me doing the job. Why am I taking a physical to do it?
Sure. Luckily, that has not happened. I would say that it's general, my understanding is it's, general practice in municipalities to have a pre-employment physical. I certainly want, Mark to weigh in if he'd like to, and I'd be curious to hear Barry's opinion as well as a labor attorney, if he thinks that is necessary. It's definitely
Mr.
one area
Interject
to
for
save
a-
money.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. We had this same discussion, Mr. Dietz, you raised the same question. We had a discussion about it. I don't know if anything has changed. My recollection, I don't have the exact date. Maybe Vanessa or Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. Mr. Purple and Ms. Hale thought it was prudent under the circumstances, and the board did not vote to change that. So if there's new or changed circumstances that you want to revisit it, I just, in the interest of time and economy, we have been here before. If you'd like me to pull up the notes of that, and we could have this discussion in December, or I open it to Mr. Purple, because I think, Mark, you spoke on this last time, and you came down on the side of keeping it. So if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I don't think anything has changed. I agree with Vanessa. There's never been anyone that I think has taken the position that Jay just took, and I don't know. I hate to keep making differences between public and private, but I've done a lot of hiring over the course of my career and everything too, and I've never had an employee or a prospective employee say, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm healthy, and there's nothing, there's nothing that I have to do this for that's basically going to affect my ability to do the job." And so, honestly, I haven't had that issue. I don't think it's bad to understand, underlying issues. Obviously, public safety. I think, you may have a different issue, Jay, with that, and you may say, yes, I agree with the public safety pieces, and possibly, a DPW, simply because there's a
Facilities.
more physical aspect.
So I'd like to hear Barry's thought of it too, but with HIPAA laws, would they be able to tell you even if something was wrong anyways? And if not, then what's the sense of doing it?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't give legal opinions anymore. Done with that. But so the way it's supposed to work is the person performing the physical is supposed to see the job description. And the only information that should be reported to the town is anything that comes out in the examination that would impact the employee's ability to perform the job. So we have the job required someone to lift 50 pounds, and the individual had some hernia or something that prevented them from doing that. The employer has a right to know that, which then triggers an obligation to engage in a discussion with the employee about whether there's an accommodation that can be made that would allow the employee to perform the job. So that's the way it's supposed to work. Now, obviously, in a lot of jobs, administrative assistant jobs, there's not many physical limitations that would impact that. But for the town to sit and say, well, this job will do it for, this job we won't, frankly, it's easier for them to just say, we're going to do it for everyone. And for probably 98% of people, they never hear anything back that would suggest the employee can't do the job. I mean, I would assume that was the case. You rarely see anything that would say this employee has a limitation that impacts their ability to do the job.
And I think that's accurate. I think that we would provide a copy of the job description, that this is basically, we need here's the position. Here's, we're looking for a physical that basically ensures that this person can do these things. So yeah, obviously, we don't want to be, we shouldn't be, for HIPAA purposes, we shouldn't be told about things that don't affect their ability to do the job. So I agree with your assessment there.
Okay, I was just bringing it up again. And then my second question is the third paragraph. Pay rate's been set at blank at your 12-month anniversary. So we're not doing 12-month anniversaries anymore, right? Everybody's getting their merit at the same time now?
You mean referring to on July 1st?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this says at your 12-month anniversary, which is no longer.
Right.
Okay.
Just on the physicals, I but Jay has brought up some excellent points. We can certainly, but
Can we back up for a minute?
Uh-huh.
I don't want to miss the 12-month anniversary. Do we need to change the letter?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Because now your raise would only take place on July 1st. You're
Right.
basically,
Right.
no matter what month you're hired.
Right.
Okay, so Vanessa, do you want to update the letter? and
I
put it in the
will,
packet
yes.
For
I
December?
made a note about 7-1.
All right.
Do we have to, and then to keep
So
going
hang
on
on.
that same sentence, the last part of that, where it says you'll be eligible for a salary adjustment up to X. Do we have to put what they're eligible to get up to? Or can
No,
we just
not
say-
necessarily.
No.
Because
Yeah, I mean-
that frankly changes every year based on the
Right.
vote of the personnel board,
Right, can we just say you'll be eligible for a salary adjustment, period?
period.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would get rid of confirming a number, because all they're gonna see is, oh, good, I'm gonna get a
That amount.
salary adjustment up to X amount.
I agree.
Because then, Jay, you come in and you say, okay, I want that.
Right, of course,
It's
why
up
wouldn't
to
we?
that number, but that's the number I want.
Right, if the range is 75 to 95, I'll take the 95.
Yep.
Sure.
All right.
I have a
Ms.
question.
Hale, thank you, Mr. Dietz, for that catch. Ms. Hale, are you clear on what the board is looking for?
Yes.
As recommended by Mr. Dietz?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much, and we'll look at an updated letter just to confirm in the December packet.
Betsy, I have a question. I have a
Wait
question.
1 minute, because Jay did have a second part. Does it relate to the physical, Dorian? Otherwise, we'll take
Yes.
it up in just a minute.
No, it's with the physical.
Okay, we're back on, we're all agreed that the letter will change with respect to anniversary date and the raise amount. Go ahead, Dorian.
Okay, so we're sending them to this urgent care in Marlboro. Are we paying for the urgent care in Marlboro? Because if people have insurance, their insurer may not cover a physical at this place. So why are we not allowing them to go to their own doctors for a physical? To fill out the form, whether they're physically able to do the job? Why are we sending them to an urgent care in Marlboro where it may end up costing them out of pocket for that? Unless we're
The-
paying for it.
The
then why are
town
we
does pay for
pay
the
for it?
pre-employment physical.
We do.
We do.
Okay, and so why are we not letting them go to their own doctor? Why are we sending them to an urgent care in Marlboro? Which doesn't have the best doctors, but I'm just asking.
Dorian, I'm going to ask you to refrain from saying something like that in a taped meeting just because it's a,
Okay, well. that's-
yeah. I don't know about the doctors at the urgent care in Marlboro. Just as
I don't know
chair, I
about
want to
the
shut down
doctors in
any
Marlboro.
suggestion that we're criticizing a particular provider. Your point is
I'm not
taken.
criticizing the provider. I'm asking why we're sending them to an urgent care in Marlboro when they have their own doctor. To me, it's a comfort thing. So I'm asking why we are saying you have to go to this particular urgent care in Marlboro.
Normally what happens is the employer who requires the pre-employment physical sets up a relationship with a particular provider and everybody goes. It's for continuity, equal, whatever. If one of the gentlemen or lady who has been involved in the hiring, it's just done for, if the employer's paying for it, you set up a billing arrangement, you probably negotiate a flat rate that may be a little more favorable.
I would tend to agree with Dorian on this. Like, if it's for a drug screen and you're just gonna walk in, do a drug screen and come out, fine. But if I'm gonna go for a full physical, I'm gonna go to my doctor instead of some random person in Marlboro.
Plus the fact, I think it's probably more cost effective to go to your own doctor than to go to a walk-in clinic.
Right, and your doctor probably already knows you. He could probably just send a letter without you actually going.
Well, yeah,
Especially
but
if it
but Jay, that's part of the problem. I think you can get your doctor to send anything you want, right?
well,
No, I don't think so.
I don't
That's
think
not-
that's-
You know
this is
what?
on the line.
In my
Then they're held-
experience,
with
yeah.
then the doctor would be held responsible and liable if something did happen. I don't think he'd put his license on the line to lie about a hernia.
Yeah, I don't think they would send a medical note in, Mark, for a job if the person really physically couldn't do it.
Couldn't
I
do
don't
it,
think
right.
they put their license on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ask a loaded question.
no.
I just didn't understand why this particular place in Marlboro, I mean,
Right.
again, you don't know the doctors there. They have their own physical, they have their own personal doctor. They have insurance that would pay for it.
They don't know your history. They don't know anything.
Yeah,
about
I mean, I'm sorry. I probably opened up a can of worms here. I was just curious. It doesn't make sense to me. So
That-
No,
that's why I brought it
you
up in
didn't
the first
open up a
place.
can of worms, Ms. Jazinski. Mr. Dietz opened the can of worms, and I'm just looking at our agenda, and we have an entire SAP to review. I don't want in any way to give short shrift to people's concerns, but what I'm going to ask people to do is I'm going to table this discussion for now till the end of the meeting, if we have time, if not till December. I think this could benefit from a little more dialogue. But I feel like we're getting stuck on a point and we have a very full agenda today.
Yeah, I'd also like to just research with our attorney, to Jay's point, you know, for someone who is just an admin person at a desk, you know, 40 hours a week, you know, is it really necessary? That would certainly save our departments a lot of money, and maybe look at the, you know, how physical is your job? So if you would allow, I could do a little bit more research before the next meeting on this.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hale, for that. So I think Ms. Jazinski, Mr. Dietz, whatever you want to present to the board, I will table this.
Okay.
If the board
when-
agrees to December, just because I want to get through the rest of this.
One last thing that'll take 1 second. The
Certainly.
second letter where it says based on 2%, 2.8% increase, can we just take that one part off?
Okay, let's just finish up. So we're all in agreement. We're going to table the physical. Everybody's going to feel free to submit anything for the board packet, and we'll have an educated discussion about it next time. I myself am not educated on this issue at all, so I'd like to take a look at it. I didn't realize it was such an issue but we had discussed it before, and whatever Mark and Vanessa would like to bring forward to us, Ms. Jazinski, whatever you would like to look at in terms of what other towns are doing, Mr. Dietz, whatever you would like to bring forward, and I will put this on the agenda for next time, for December. So going to page 14, this is the payroll letter that was sent out in connection with the synchronization. Ms. Jazinski had asked that Ms. Hale provide, this was part of Ms. Hale's report on synchronization at a previous meeting, I think the last meeting. And Ms. Jazinski asked that a copy of the synchronization letter be provided because we hadn't seen it. So that's what Ms. Hale did. So Mr. Dietz, you have a comment on the
No, I
payroll
think it's
letter?
fine. I just don't know if we needed to include the 2.8% increase part of it, but other than that, I don't really care.
It went already.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, but it was just, Jay, to
I
be
just
clear,
don't want
this
people
isn't,
to think that that's going to be the new norm of a 2.8% increase.
Vanessa, my understanding is this was the letter that was sent out to the 50 employees
Correct.
in connection with the,
Yeah.
okay,
So that might change year by year.
Okay.
Or will change year by year.
okay. I'm going to ask this board's indulgence while I take 2-minute break, and I will return in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Vanessa, so you have a lot of people involved in the interviewing process who I assume have no training in doing that. I assume who have no training in interviewing in these kinds of situations.
Do you mean employees or other board members, Barry?
Well, either.
Okay.
They do
so-
behavioral based interviews, or are they just kind of walking in blind and saying, why did you leave this last job? And everybody's asking that same
Well,
question.
I always, this is something I learned a lot from Russ Milholland on, you know, I always provide, you know, interview questions ahead of time. So everyone kind of sticks to the same script. So they're more, you know, oral interviews than behavioral, Jay.
Okay.
I would suggest you might want to put together a short list of do's and don'ts, because asking the wrong question can get you into trouble. And some people just wouldn't be sensitive to what you can ask and what you can't ask.
Right.
So, you know, just something simple that people can see, or that you put at the top of the interview questions you provide.
Or we do have an old document that speaks to that exactly, Barry, you know, from Russ, from his private sector company. But, you know, it was something that he gave me quite a few years ago. So it's definitely something we could refresh on. So I'll make a note of that.
It is true, Barry. If you ask certain questions, you might as well just give them the offer letter.
Right,
So I know.
yep,
Yeah, or people like me get called in to.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
right.
Save
If
the
it's
day.
not work related, don't ask it.
Okay, thank you all. Sorry for that. So I think we're done with hiring process overview. We're tabling the physical question. And Vanessa, I can talk with you offline. Perhaps we
Sure.
could do a little survey to give the board additional information
agree.
about what other towns do. Not that we have to do what all the other towns do, but that would be helpful to
Yeah.
me. And thank you, Mr. Dietz, and thank you, Ms. Jasinski. All right, we're moving on to 3B4, town use of interns, and this is something Ms. Hale requested be put on the agenda. You have the floor, Vanessa.
Sure, thank you. I'll be quick here. We are seeing a little bit more of an interest in having paid internships. The Board of Health did one this summer, certainly to help them with COVID and getting ready for flu clinics, et cetera. So it's not something we've ever classified in the SAP, but I don't think that these people really fall under the definition of an independent contractor because the town department would be, controlling what equipment they're using, what hours they're working, what tasks they're assigned. So it's something that I think as our budgets go through much more of a fine tooth comb over the next 2 or 3 years, there may be more interest in having some interns to help with projects. So it's not something the Personnel Board has ever investigated very much, but I was wondering if you would be interested in looking at that because I think it will come up more often over the next 2 to 3 years.
Are you gonna 1099 or W-2 them?
I think they would be W-2, Jay, because I think they would earn enough money to qualify to be over the 1099 limit, which
Well,
I think is that $600.
It wouldn't make a difference. I mean, it just depends on if you're gonna 1099 or W-2 them. There's
Okay.
no limit.
But I mean, you
Okay.
said they're gonna be employees, clearly.
Right.
I think they
That's
would
why
be
I asked.
employees.
So
Right.
that's why I'm thinking W-2.
Yeah, usually an intern is a W-2 because they're gonna have a specific job to do. They're gonna have hours. They're gonna have a manager. They're not gonna be an independent consultant. You're gonna give them
Right.
their equipment. So, and you're gonna give them a W-2 at the end of the year for the money that they've earned.
So they're not classified anywhere. So we would have to, certainly go through a process and do some research on how to do this. I've started collecting examples from other municipalities, but I wanted to bring this to the board and get your feedback.
I would W-2 them. That's me.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Thank you, Mr. Dietz. I think the question goes beyond how will we compensate them to whether or not we want to include them in the SAP. Should they be included in the SAP? Should there be a policy? So I open it up to the board for comments.
If we're gonna treat them like a regular employee, then yeah. It's like we're hiring another person for the town.
Short term, generally, but yes.
Vanessa, if you can say, do they fall within a certain, I'm mindful of years ago when the consultant said the classification system that she recommended for the town was to go toward less job descriptions and more I just said less and more, to go to less job descriptions and each job description that we have cover as many departments as possible. So I'm just wondering if it would be possible, just throwing this out there, to have, are these folks generally full-time or part-time, or are they both?
I think it depends if it's during a school semester, it might be more part-time. During the summer, it generally would be full-time.
Okay.
What do we
so
do for seasonal people?
Seasonal people, for the most part, are recreational and they're classified under their own schedule in the SAP.
I think it might be helpful for this board, if there is an interest in looking at this, to have a little more detail about what we're talking about. Full-time, part-time, how many schedules would be affected, and maybe what we would be looking at is just including a general intern classification in schedules A and C, and possibly another schedule that would be at a certain grade. If we survey what we're doing now and we find that, yes, generally we're paying interns between, I have no idea what we're paying them. Do you know what we're paying them across the town?
Offhand, no.
Okay, so if they fall into a grade 3 or a 2 or a 4, I don't know what they fall into. Maybe it would be possible to create one classification for Schedule
So
A and
I
Schedule
could
C.
certainly pull together a memo with more detailed information for your December meeting if you like.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Board members, is there anything in particular other than identifying how we're using interns currently and what they're being paid and where they would go? Anything else you'd like to know?
No, just need more information before I can.
Right.
Okay, thank you, folks. That would be helpful, Vanessa. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, and we're on 3C, board member reports, liaison meetings, discussion with departments and boards. So I think I'll just, if the board is agreeable, I'll keep this as a standing report on our agenda. And as people have discussions, if there's anything they want to bring up about what they're learning. One case I think would be if you're having your interviews under the liaison initiative and something comes up that you think would be really helpful in terms of a specific topic that the board is discussing, love to hear it. I haven't completed all mine. I'm halfway through, so I think I'll just hold my report till the end. But certainly I'm going to open it up. If anybody has anything that they would like to either give a full report now, or I'll leave it open to the board because we didn't really discuss how we want to present these. So I'll open it up if anybody has anything on their liaison discussions. I don't
Well,
see
I'll
anything.
open it up with, I dropped the ball and I have meetings scheduled for next week and I haven't even called Mr. Purple yet. So I've been a
one
little
step beh-
overwhelmed with stuff here at the house. So I'm sorry, I apologize, but I have been negligent in following through on my liaison.
No, this is a no judgment zone.
It doesn't matter. I have not done my due diligence and I apologize, but I have set up a couple of meetings and I will call Mr. Purple later on today and set something up.
Thank you, Mr. Zazinski.
I'm one step behind you. So
What is
I
this?
haven't
This is like
contacted
true
anybody yet.
confessions.
I haven't not contacted anybody yet. I just have not had a chance.
Well,
All right.
I'm afraid I'm going to be the caboose on the train here. Then, if you're one step behind. But
Dave, you can't have done less than Jay did because he just said he's
The
done
only
nothing.
way the only way Dave could do less is if he didn't know about it.
All right.
in legal terms, nolo contende.
Okay. I'm going to leave this. Y'all know, anybody have any questions about what it is they're supposed to be doing?
No.
I
No,
will
no,
leave
what
it as an open item on our agenda. And if you have sharing, this will be our sharing time. I will tell you, I've done 2 of my interviews. I've heard common themes from both, and they have been very helpful. And I will hold until I finish them. And that leaves our star pupil, Mr. Rubenstein, who has been proceeding apace. Not to put you on the spot, if you have anything you want to share, otherwise we'll.
I'm not going to be the teacher's pet. I'm not going to acknowledge that I've completed my work, but so I'll save it for another day.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Okay. So now we are moving on to old business. I put board member goals on the agenda some time ago, inspired by the Board of Selectmen. I think it is, in light of the last report, I think it's fine if people don't have long lists of goals. This board has a specific bylaw. We have a duty to do many different things, and your goal may be as simple as fulfilling your mission under the SAP. But from time to time, folks bring things up, and I don't want those things to get lost. If you have goals, and your goals could be particular priorities for the SAP, and we'll be talking about the SAP in a few minutes. But if anybody has any goals or priorities that they would like to share that they don't think is going to be addressed, I do plan to walk everybody through the SAP for specific provisions. So if one of your goals is, I know Jay had spoken to us many times about fixing a particular definition of anniversary date in the SAP. We know that is your goal, Jay, and that has been noted, and it will be on a review of the SAP in a few minutes under new business. But if anybody has anything outside the SAP or anything they would like to bring to the board's attention, Now 4A is more sharing time. So I open it up.
I would like to make sure we address the tuition reimbursement policy. And
Okay.
that does get done before our appointments are over on June 30th.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Jasinski. So that will also be under 5B when we talk about the bylaw. We're going to be talking about quadrennial review, Ms. Jasinski. And if you look at our requirement to do quadrennial review under section 16E of the SAP, it means we look at the classification schedule, the salary schedules, and the board policies. So we can take a look at tuition when we do that. So thank you very much. Anybody else in addition to Dorianne?
Yeah,
Yes.
I've got a couple. One is, I think at some point we've got to just sit down and resolve, are we intent on moving towards a merit-based system or are we not? Because I think we spin our wheels a lot on trying to figure out how to do it. And I think we have to address, maybe we shouldn't be trying to do it at all. But I think just sitting down and making a decision, at least for our board, is that a goal that we have or isn't it? And the second is, and I know, Betsy, you've made a lot of efforts in this area to get our arms around what are the personnel policies in the town. Now, I know you've asked to see them, but surely there's got to be an EEO non-discrimination policy. There's got to be a sexual harassment policy. There's got to be an FMLA policy. I've never seen any of those. And the disciplinary policy, are they out there? I mean, they should be out there. And if they're out there, I think we should have the opportunity to see them.
Is that it, Barry?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So on point one, merit, I think we could take that up a little later today on 5B3 when we talk about the annual salary adjustment. We can address whether it's going to be a point or a range or something else. So thank you for that. And as far as personnel policies, I would open it up to Mr. Purple and Ms. Hale to, if you have a response to that, and if we could get a copy of those policies, that would be great.
So I'll leave the specifics to Mrs. Hale, but I was hoping that Barry was going to say that with regard to the bylaw, if we can take a look at, trying to maybe go down this road. I make this plea a lot, but Barry went this way one time. I figured maybe he'd go again. If we could take a look at the bylaw and putting in the roles of responsibilities of the personnel board, but then allowing the personnel board, which you already have, the latitude to make, policies and rules and regulations within those guidelines with regards to particular issues. So as Ms. Jasinski just said, a tuition policy so that the bylaw references your ability to do it. But this board, sets up a policy which actually does it, as that it lays out the process on how it's going to happen. And then, personnel stuff is fluid. So if you need to change something, you don't have to wait 12 months for a town meeting in order to effectuate some of those changes. And I know there's been varying opinions, and I know I may just be twisting in the wind here, but I think it is worth mentioning, to see if, again, at some point, the board wants to take, a stab at looking at just picking something or picking a few things that it would make sense to be able to have a little more control at the board level on the process, but letting the bylaw define what things, that you are responsible for.
Thank you, Mr. Purple. I didn't understand your response in reference to Barry's question. I know we talked about taking.
I'm sorry. I took an opening. I was going to, Vanessa will, I think I'd let Vanessa actually answer Barry's question. But
I'm not sure Barry raised the question of personnel policies, equal opportunity, EEOC, non-discrimination, FMLA, and disciplinary policies. These do not fall under the SAP. We're going to review our policies in a few minutes. We have tuition reimbursement, sick bank, and a policy on not giving raises over a set amount. This would be something that would be in the bailiwick of the town administrator, if I understood Barry's question. And Barry, feel free to jump in and correct me. I didn't hear an answer to the question about where are these EEOC, FMLA, et cetera policies. I heard another discussion.
I think I may have jumped the gun, and this would probably be more prudent comment under the review of the SAP. So
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'll let Vanessa actually answer the question.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Purple.
So a number of those policies are, of course, in place. We try and keep them updated on the website, although we probably need to refresh what's there. It's been a while since we looked at that. I do have them all either in Word or PDF formats. Actually, the board, some members of the Board of Selectmen are looking at them right now to that point, because so many of them are outdated. So I'm happy to make an additional binder as you know, either one large PDF or hard copies if the board would like to review them. But to the chair's point, many of them are issued by the Board of Selectmen, but they are, global policies for all town employees.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Mr. Rubenstein, would it suffice, do you think, if Ms. Hale included maybe these documents for our next board meeting?
Yeah, I would just like to see them, know they're there. I'm certainly
Okay.
not going to, advise you on them, but yeah, it would be helpful for me at least, to see them, know they're in place.
Ms. Hale, would it be reasonable? Nobody else is saying anything. Sense of the board that we would like to see these policies, and you could just put them together and give them to
Sure,
for the next packet.
sure.
And if you want to do a short cover memo, just letting us know, maybe whenever I get policies from you, I did this with the job descriptions. I did a little table. I sent it out to everybody, just saying the subject matter and then the date of it. And then maybe just a third column, you could say under review or on the town website, this has been finalized. Just to give us a sense of whether or not we're looking at antiques or whether or not these are.
Sure. So just to clarify for a moment, the ones that I gave to some members of the board recently, Board of Selectmen, that is, were, sort of bulk policies. Are you, so that might include things that are not employee related. Are you looking for just employee related policies that would cover non-union employees?
I'm sorry, I didn't know, you said you gave them bulk?
Well,
policy?
I'm talking about all of our town policies. Some of them might be related to, street acceptances or zoning or things beyond,
No.
covering
Just
employees.
personnel,
Okay, just to clarify.
just personnel. Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Anybody else?
Yes, Betsy?
Yes.
There were two things that I had made a note on that I feel would be prudent to get resolved this coming year. And one of them, which we've touched on a little bit, was to revisit the salary adjustment and a percentage for everyone, which to me, it just can't be an automatic 2.8%. It has to, you have some people that work hard, some people that coast, some people that underperform. And so it has to be based on performance or even this question of merit based, which was tabled at one time, but I think we need to have further discussion on that. So that's one item. The other one is to resolve the review system that's used by the department heads. Currently, the latest reviews that came in, there was nothing, they didn't use the category at all of needs improvement or unsatisfactory. There seemed to be a reluctance to put that into the performance review. And I think, again, there has to be some way to elicit an actual true response from the department heads. And I know that they probably don't want to put down a negative comment for fear of some sort of review by the people under them. But I think we need to address that review system.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. To your first point of revisiting the salary adjustment, we will be talking about the annual adjustment in a few minutes under new business. And 2, resolving the review system. That is a very broad topic. Thank you for your comments. This was the subject of our entire meeting back in September. It was the birth of the liaison system. So I'm hoping that when that would be the first step in terms of discussing expectations. I don't need to revisit that whole conversation.
Right.
I would note that I am addressing this specifically when I talk to department heads who do reviews in terms of what needs improvement means to them and why they didn't use it. So I encourage you to have that discussion with your departments that you are liaisoning with. And the next step will be when everybody completes those, talk about the discussion. It's been enlightening for me to hear from the department heads. The second part of that is another thing, and I've raised this before to your point, Mr. Nixon. Many of the reviewers are department heads who themselves do not get reviewed by this board. So when we talk about, or to use your language, department heads didn't do appropriate responses. I'm not sure what the word, true responses is the word you use. This board does not have a mechanism for going back to department heads and asking them to do something else. A lot of our department heads are under contract, they're contract employees, and we don't see their reviews. And they're reviewed. I don't know, Mark, you spoke to this before the Board of Selectmen. You said you don't use a form to review the contract employees. You have conversations instead. So what would be the mechanism for this board to give feedback to managers who are contract employees? I'm thinking of Ms. Galligan at the DPW. I'm thinking of Mr. Ballantyne, the finance director. How do we better communicate with them other than just to say, we'd like to see you do a better job? Is there any feedback that you give them when you review them in terms of, because part of what you review an employee for is how they manage people.
Right.
So we see the bottom end, nobody's at the bottom. We see one end of it, but we don't give feedback to the managers who are under contract because they're not SAP employees.
Right. There was, and the selectmen did have a conversation about this. You know, I had agreed that, you know, I would have written evaluations, you know, for all of the contract managers. I've done it with the department, with the contract employees, more in a long form, handwritten piece where they provide me, you know, information on, you know, as they have viewed their year, you know, what went right, what went wrong, you know, talk to me about, you know, your goals, what you got done, what you didn't, what were your obstacles, you know, what are things that, you know, that you may have been involved in or did that I wasn't involved in, and what are you looking, you know, what are you know, looking at moving forward, you know, for goals, for training, for things like that. And then I provide a document back to them, you know, basically my thoughts on the same, you know, on the same questions. And we meet, you know, we, you know, have conversations, you know, about the documents, and, you know, and we, you know, have conversations during the year, you know, about these things as we move forward. But it's, I think it's more of a free flowing rather than a box checking exercise, you know, that you know, and I find that there's more value, you know, with the contract employees with that, from my perspective.
Thank you for that, Mr. Purple. What will you bring back to the managers about these discussions that Personnel Board is having about our dissatisfaction with the reviews and their level of honesty? What will you bring back to them in your free-flowing discussions?
Well, I think that there's not a lot I can add to, you know, I think most of the department heads and the managers, be it contract employees or otherwise, are familiar with, you know, the meetings and the discussions that you've had about the reviews that were submitted. One of the silver linings of the pandemic, if there is one, is that all of these meetings are taped. They're all on YouTube, and you get to watch meetings and see things that you normally wouldn't see. And so obviously, you know, you don't get a whole lot of in-person attendance sometimes at the personnel board meetings. It's the same people, but I think, you know, more people are viewing these things and that. So I think the departments in general, you know, have an understanding, be they contract employees or otherwise, have an understanding of the dissatisfaction of the personnel board. And the question, I think, is how to, you know, is to have a dialogue to understand, you know, what exactly, you know, you want to see, so that there is, you know, I mean, I don't think anybody wants to go through a process where they know at the end of the day, it's not going to be what you want, you know, or it's not going to be in the format, or it's not going to address the things that, that you want to see addressed in the way that you want to see them addressed. So I think it's more of a clarification and a better, you know, as you said to Mrs. Hale earlier, if you know, if this was a new employee and you gave them this set of bullet points, you know, would you be okay with this, or do you want to break it out a little bit more? I think it's basically putting some more meat on the bones with regards to, you know, this is what we're expecting, but this is what we're, you know, this is illustrative of what we'd like to see.
You see the same situations and the same reviews that we do. I appreciate that the department heads can now go online and watch these meetings, but you're the one who's reviewing them. So when you review them, do you include as an element of your review their conduct as managers? And do you share some or all of the thoughts that this board expressed? And will you import those expectations into your reviews? Quite apart
Yes,
from what
I
they
do.
can, I presume that you're reviewing, who does Mr. Ballantyne's review? Is that Board of Selectmen?
I do.
Okay. Ms. Galligan?
I do.
Okay. So you have an opportunity, apart from these televised meetings that we do, to have a conversation in private with your department heads about how they are as managers. And I presume you do have those conversations.
I do, but I don't, but I have them all, you know, I have them, you know, these are regular conversations. These aren't simply review conversations. These are
But
things, because I think if you're waiting every 12 months to talk about things that bother you, then you're really not managing, you know, correctly.
absolutely. So in the last quarter, did these reviews come up in your discussions? Are you having a dialogue with your managers about what's happening at this level as personnel director? Are you having that convo?
I have those conversations. You know, can I specifically say that, you know, yes, I had this conversation with the police chief. I had this, but, you know,
Police chief wouldn't be one of the, I guess I'm talking more about the SAP employers.
well, he does have an SAP employee.
Couple, yeah, couple. Okay.
So, yes. So like I said, you know, yes, I do. I have, you know, I have these, you know, I have the conversations, you know, in terms of, you know, how they're managing their employees, if there are issues, you know, with their employees, and, you know, and I'm more interested to ensure that, you know, if things aren't going well, that we're making sure that things are getting back on the rails, and there's a process in place to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Purple? Any other comments?
Nope.
To Mr. Nixon's point about improving the process of reviews? Okay. Any other board member want to speak on their goals or priorities? All right. Thank you all. We are on to new business, 5A. We have a departmental request from the assessor's office. Is Mr. Sabelli patiently waiting in the ante room?
Yes.
I'm afraid to touch the button that shows me who's around because I'll disconnect something. I'm on a new device today, so. All right, welcome, Mr. Sabelli. Thank you for waiting so patiently. We are on 5A1, Assessor's Office.
Okay, here's my problem, Betsy. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I cannot see you.
Okay. How do they see me?
Can you
Hold
turn
on.
on the?
I got to get my technical advisor.
Yeah, the video feed at the bottom left of your screen.
Where am I going?
Thank you, Ms. Hale.
Ah, there we go.
You see me?
Thanks, Corinne.
Welcome.
Okay, so I've got a new computer, so I'm trying to figure out which screen to look at here. So
You look fabulous.
Betsy, I'm going to probably have to ask you to put me on the next agenda because we have a finance meeting in 10 minutes.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Sibeli. Maybe next time, let me know and I can maybe pierce through some of the confusion and, not confusion, through the other discussion and bring you forward in the agenda. I apologize. Do you
No
want to
problem.
just introduce your topic?
So basically what we're looking for is looking for some type of additional compensation for the assessing designation for the deputy assessor when they achieve that. If you guys think of where you went to college, I don't think any of you, your alma maters, had a bachelor's degree in assessing or treasurer collector or town clerk or any of that. So where do you get your education? Your education comes from the professional organizations that we belong to. A lot of the course, it's a pretty long course load and very expensive. When we finish with Corinne's designation, we'll probably be into it for about $11,000 between tuition, paying mileage, and obviously we're paying her as she's at class. And really the gist of this is very simple. I've mentioned it, I think, a year ago or whatever. It's really what happens is you put these people through all these classes, you create a great deal of value in the individual. It's your tax dollars paying for it. And then there's no mechanism to basically protect from them being plucked from us by another community. And I think that's kind of the gist of it. What I did send you is two bills or two
Laws. You sent me references to law.
Two sections of the law. And basically you can go to town meeting and put these on a warrant and get one of these through. And it's kind of based on that situation. It's to add additional compensation to anybody with this designation or who can achieve this designation. One of them, I threw both of them in there. One of them basically maxes out at $1,000. And the second one is 10% additional compensation, which in this case would work out to be about $5,800. In my opinion, one's too low, the other one's too high. And quite frankly, I don't think that's really the correct way to do it. It really should be put in the SAP and go through the proper channels. So that's what we're looking to do. When I introduced it to Betsy, it was more, I'm not sure how we're going to do this. I mentioned the word stipend, and I believe, Betsy, you had referred me to Section 12, Schedule E, and that's on page
Section
22.
20. Section 20 is the schedules, Paul, and
Is it?
stipends are under E in
Yeah.
Section 20.
Is it 20 or 12? 12, 20? Yeah, Section
Section
20. I'm sorry,
20.
Betsy. And I think the other place we were looking at it is Section, I think it's 11, Betsy?
Yeah, so
Somewhere around H or I?
Section 20 is where the pay schedules are, and it
Yep.
would be E, Schedule E, which is miscellaneous compensation. And then the other place we looked at was is Section 11 under educational benefits.
Yeah, maybe adding something there.
Yep.
And again, this would probably be something for all three, financial departments and maybe the clerk's office. We get our professional training, and again, it's not go to a course for 3 hours and come home with a binder and a certificate to tack on the wall. These are it's quite a huge workload to get through these. The assessors is about 8 courses, final exams in each one of them, and it also requires 18 months on the job training. So it's a pretty long process, and most of us also require continuing education attached to it for the remainder to renew the certification, which I believe ours is every 3 years. So again, once you obtain this, it creates a great deal of market value for you. And obviously you're a lot more educated. So what we're looking for is some type of compensation once you achieve this. And when we were out looking for to replace our deputy, the There's not a lot of people out there. There's not a lot of people out there with these designations. When we rewrote the job description, we wanted this designation to be achieved within 3 years if they didn't have it. And again, once you shell out all this money, it's kind of like, well, why aren't we bumping them up in pay significantly so that we could retain them? That's kind of the gist of it.
Thank you, Mr. Sabelli. I know your time is very short. So when you contact me.
Doesn't sound too good. You know
Excuse
something
me?
I don't?
Today, just today.
Okay.
When you contacted me, one thing that came to mind is we had discussed this designation for the previous employee in this
Right.
position. You had come before the board and it may predate everybody else on the board except me. I think it was back to 2017. You had requested an annual raise for the previous employee in light of this designation. I don't remember if we were 2.25 or 2.5 that year. And we did give 3.75% raise to the last person who held this position in light of this certification. I was very new to the board. I think it might have been November 2017.
Right
I
on.
I sent you those minutes. Yeah, November 2017. It was when the board, I was new to the board. The board was still struggling with what to do with things like this. And if someone came and made a case, in that case, you made a good case, I guess, because we approved giving more of a raise to the employee than to others based on this designation. So my first question is, did the current employee get the benefit of that salary bump when they stepped into the position, even though they don't as yet have the certification? So my question
Okay, so what I'm going
is,
to do first is the raise was 3.75. It was
Yeah.
a 2.5 this year. So we asked for an additional 1.25%, which is approximately $680.
okay. But
Okay,
that
the-
was built into the salary every year.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Now-
done, just to be clear to the board, it was not done as a stipend or any additional payment. We gave an additional 1.25% or $680 to the last person in the position by reason. So their salary went up and continued to go up every year. And then my question is, when we hired Ms. Diaz, who did not have this designation, did we take her salary back down to previous levels and say, we'll look at it when you get the designation? And I think our discussion was no, we paid her pretty close to what we paid the outgoing employee who had the designation and had gotten the raise, correct?
Yeah, couple of moving parts on that.
Yep.
So Cindy was a grade 4. Remember when we hired Corinne, we were in the process of putting together a new job description, which you guys approved right prior to her hiring.
Yes, we
and that's what we
reclassified
hired
the
her under?
position to grade 5.
So it was 2 different job descriptions. And let me try to think what the other moving part here was. When we brought her in, we were kind of handcuffed on what to do, because if we moved her to a 5, we had to get her up high enough. I think we brought her in pretty close to the midpoint. We brought her in at the midpoint of 4, so then when it got reclassified to a 5, she would be slightly above the minimum of 5. Does that make sense?
Yeah, at the end of the day, Paul, I think her salary was pretty close to what Cindy had been paid.
Yep, yep.
Even though Corin didn't have the experience, you
Right.
sold us on her potential.
Yep.
And the dearth of great candidates out there. And she's a terrific candidate, and she's obviously helping you. She just came in. You
Excellent.
wouldn't be
Excellent.
here on this meeting if it weren't for her. But my question in terms of the stipend is, I feel like even with all these moving parts, the board needs to know whether or not Ms. Diaz is already being compensated. Did we build this compensation into her salary by paying her what I think when I asked you when we were talking to prepare for this meeting, to give us Cindy's outgoing salary and Corin's incoming salary. And I think it was a very small difference. Cindy might have.
It was a
been-
very small difference. It
Yeah.
was a very small difference.
Hey, Betsy,
So, go ahead, Jay.
I have to jump off. I have a 2 o'clock hard stop. I have a call at 2 o'clock.
Okay. Sorry to hear. Sorry to see you go.
Okay.
All right, our meeting, do you have any limitations in January? We'll be calendaring a meeting.
Not right now, I don't think so.
Okay, the second week in January, hopefully. We've been asked to calendar 2 at a time, so.
Yeah, just send it, it should be fine.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Dietz.
Yep.
We'll miss you. Thanks. All right, so Paul, I think it's pretty clear we're gonna continue this till December. So the two pieces that I wanted the board to consider was whether or not we already gave this position this bump that you're asking for.
Yeah, and again, Betsy, it's hard to answer because the job descriptions that Cindy was working on is much different than the job description that Corinne is working under. We basically made Corinne's almost a mirror of mine, or not quite, but the idea was that if I'm out for 3 or 4 months, something happens medically or something, the assistants need to be able to step into our position and run the department. Even if they seek help from contractors outside, they need to have the full knowledge of my position. And so the new job description is significantly different and much more robust, requires much more education. Again, the certification is important, or this accreditation is much more important to the board. So the question you're asking me, I'm comparing apples and oranges. And when we did Cindy's, I think you stated it correctly. We really didn't have any type of mechanism, I think is the word you used to me, and you weren't sure how to handle it. So again, I don't think the compensation is built in. I wouldn't agree with that. Again, you're comparing two different job descriptions.
Okay, I don't think we have time to debate what did or did not
Yeah.
happen in November 2017, except to say something happened, and I would like the board to be more educated about it. So the first step would be perhaps just to introduce that discussion into the packet for the next time. And the
Okay.
second piece we talked about, because it seems to me that what this is all about is an investment in an employee and making sure we're competitive and can keep that employee. So you were going to
Perfect.
look at what some other towns were talking about. I agree with you. What happened in November 2017 doesn't entirely answer the question. I would like to look at it. But in terms of what has happened with deputy assessors in the area in the last 3 years, it's now November 2020. It's 3 years later. I think what happened in November 2017 is a piece of it, but I agree with you, it's not the whole piece. The second piece is, are we paying this person enough to keep them competitive? What do other cities and towns around us do? I don't need to know what Framingham does. It's a city with not
We're already working on
not
that.
surrounding cities and towns, but folks that are what we like to think of as our comparables. And you were
Yep.
going to try to pull together some data for us on what other towns do. And now I'd just like to, before Paul has to head out, open it up to any other board members who have any other information they would like to get from Mr. Sibeli for a December continuation of this conversation.
I just want more information, so I'm good.
Okay, anything in particular, Ms. Jasinski, other than the previous salary action, the new job description, which we have, board members have job descriptions, and what external comps, anything else from Mr. Sibeli?
Do we have Cindy's old job description so we can compare it to the new one for Corinne?
Absolutely. During.
See where the difference is?
Yep,
That
I got that.
would be
You
beneficial.
want that?
Yeah.
Yes,
Good.
please.
Thank
Other
you.
than
Great
that, I
point.
think you covered it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jasinski.
And then
Are
Betsy,
we
just
working
real
with
quick,
the same list of towns that we use for compensation purposes in terms of figuring out what they're doing?
Barry, what we're
Sure.
trying to do is, again, the deputy assessor position kind of here, we model it after Hopkinton. Northborough's looking to do the same type of thing. So they have been in the process, although their principal assessor just left. So they have a new principal assessor. What we're doing is going up the 495 belt and looking at similar towns, also up and down Route 9. Not all assessing departments are similar. And what happens is, Barry, when you have larger communities, the staff is more specialized. they're not required to know everything. They're only doing a little piece. Corinne will be doing just about everything that we do here. So it's kind of a little bit different. So what we're trying to quantify is how many people, A, require a certification, and B, have a very similar type position to what we have. Hopefully I answered your question.
Well, but we're paying for the certification regardless of what the responsibilities of the individual assessor are, aren't we?
Say that again, Barry?
What you're asking us to do is give additional money for the certification, regardless of what the individual assessor may or may not be doing. So job duties are separate. We're paying for the certification. So it seems to me it shouldn't matter how the departments are set up as to whether or not they're paying for the certification.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at, Barry, is not everybody has a deputy assessor position. We're looking for that position to encompass all facets of the assessing function. Okay, so that's why we want an accreditation, is so that the individual has education and will gain experience with us. What happens in other communities is they don't have, a lot of them don't have deputy assessors. They're larger, so they specialize each position. They're not requiring or having a position that's going to encompass everything. So that's what we're kind of struggling with now. Who has a deputy assessor? How is it similar? And are in fact they going to compensate somebody more if in fact they obtain this certification? So those are the things, and is it necessary?
Because it seems to me what you're trying to do is figure out a way, and I'm not being critical of this, but figuring out whether this employee in this job should be paid more. You're not really asking for additional money for getting an accreditation.
That's what one of the things we're looking at with the other communities. A, is it required? And B, is there some type of bump? Are you paying them higher once they got their accreditation? Those are the things we're researching, Barry. Hopefully I answered your question. I understand what you're getting at.
Yeah, I mean, when I see the
Again,
data, maybe I'll.
When they obtained this certification, okay, is the town willing to pay more, or do they get some type of bump for the value they created by educating this individual?
Okay, that's why I'm saying that would be true of any assessor, regardless of whether a deputy assessor, chief assessor, whatever. So when you're looking, and I assume you're going to do that, we're going to ask that, just the flat question, do you pay additional compensation for someone who gets this accreditation?
Yes, but the thing is, one of the things I want you not to be confused with, principal assessor, you're not going to get a job without the designation. Unless, of course, some towns will say if you have a license, if you're a licensed and certified real estate appraiser, they will hire you with the caveat that within 2 or 3 years, you'll get your designation. That's actually how I got hired. I'm a real estate appraiser.
Okay. I don't want to belabor this. You're going to be coming back. We can look at the data.
Harry, whatever input you get, because I'm still, we're still kind of trying to figure this out. Should it in fact be a stipend, which I'm not a huge fan of? Should something be written in, in the other section we were talking about? And it's just, I think it's really important that we recognize the value that we've built into these people, so that we can continue to, keep them, essentially. Because what happens is a lot of towns don't want to pay the money, but they're quick to pluck your employee. Because there isn't a lot of people going into this, and it's difficult to find people. So, you end up finding somebody like a Corinne who is young, and you got to spend a ton of money on this person, which again, it's just going to increase the value.
So basically, you're trying to put together some sort of a comparison of various.
Yeah, we're
towns
trying,
in
Dave. Yeah,
Okay.
trying to quantify it.
Yeah. So do you think you'll have that available for the next meeting?
I'm hoping to. I'm
Okay.
hoping to. If not, we may push it off until January. And go
Okay.
from there.
Well, I think that'll certainly give us a little more background information to work
Yep.
with.
You know, and the
Alright.
thought I want
And
for you guys is just, do we do a stipend? Do we, where do we put this? And I need ideas. I don't have all the answers, to be honest with you.
When this came up, I did consult with Vanessa regarding whether or not she thought it was appropriate to go into the stipend table. And she did mention there are other departments with other employees who get professional certifications. And as she always does, encouraged me to look at this in a global sense. It's not just, I won't say she encouraged me to look in a global sense, maybe that's too strong, but just to recognize that there are other departments who have employees who do get certifications from time to time. And although Mr. Sabelli argues persuasively for his department, this board should be aware of other departments with certifications. So
And
I
that's
think a
kind of what I'm
similar
getting
thing,
at.
a
That's kind of what I'm
similar
getting
thing
at.
came up. I'm reminded of the debate about the green energy manager stipend. And that was a discussion with Mr. Purple about a stipend for the facilities director who was performing a set of tasks. And we had an employee come up from the DPW to say, hey, a lot of us do a lot of different things, and spoke against adding something special to the SAP for one employee. So I just, in that, not exactly the same scenario, but in that same vein, I would want to be aware of whether or not we're opening up the gates to a similar argument on behalf of other departments. And I really don't know about the professional certifications of our municipal employees. So Mr. Purple or Ms. Hale, if you have anything to contribute to that debate, maybe you could bring that on December 9th.
December 9th is when it is?
Yeah, is our
Yes.
next meeting. Because I think Mark and Vanessa may have a little better view of the employees and their certifications that I don't. Maybe Vanessa, you and I can discuss offline. And maybe I need to do some research if Vanessa doesn't have that information, just to put this request in context. All right,
That sounds
Mr.
good.
Sabelli, thank you very much, and we'll see
Thank
you
you.
on December 9th.
Thank you.
Okay. So unfortunately, we're going into our third hour. I don't know how much folks have time to hang around and get through the rest of new business. The next item on our agenda is 5B, the personnel bylaw. This is where we go through the bylaw. My first stop at reviewing the bylaw for potential revisions for town meeting, I usually start with Ms. Hale, and I ask her and Mr. Purple what they're looking at and what they think ought to get some attention. And we have started that process. All right, Ms. Hale is telling us that she has an interview scheduled for 3:00. So maybe we could try to wrap this up by 2:30 and just go through what we need to do, and then we can move to our corners and get it done. So the first thing that we were looking at in the SAP was, I guess we're not going to have time to sit and go through it section by section today, and we can take that up in December. Maybe have to get through some of these other things a little more quickly.
Yeah, why don't we put this off till December, Betsy?
Okay.
Because this is going to be very cumbersome. Why don't we put this off?
Okay, I just do want to get the board, thank you, Ms. Jasinski. I do want to get the board members thinking about some things for December, if I might. The first thing is Mr. Dietz had to hop off. Section 1, definition of anniversary date. If you would make a note to look at that. Section 1, anniversary date. We discussed this, and if you want to make a note, at the following board meetings. January 29th, 2020. And there was a memo in the packet at page 13. We discussed it again on June 3rd, 2020. And we discussed it again on August 15th, 2020. We've kind of gone around and around anniversary date. So if y'all could look at that, and I will follow up with Mr. Dietz, and we can look at the definition. That was definitely something that's been flagged several times. If you look at those discussions ahead of time, it might make it a shorter discussion. The next section I would draw your attention to are sections 11 and 13. We discussed this at our meeting. If you want to make a note, January 15, 2020. We discussed some of these policies again at our board meeting on May 20, 2020. And I was contacted by the vice chair of advisory committee, Mr. Malinowski. They are looking at sick and vacation time and asked to meet with our board. And Mr. Malinowski will be coming for a discussion of certain provisions of section 11. I have scheduled him also for December 9th. So maybe the first thing is if everyone could book 3 hours for our meeting on December 9th. Unfortunately, we may need it. All right. So thanks. And my conversation with Ms. Hale also included section 11, reviewing section 14. Ms. Hale, you were going to get me some more information about section 14, section 12, section 13, which we've already met, and the recreation department is supposed to be getting us some revisions for their seasonal workers. That's a dialogue we started with them last year that hasn't been completed.
They hope to have that ready in plenty of time for your December meeting.
Great. So just some things I wanted to highlight for the board. Then moving on to, thank you, Vanessa, 5B2 quadrennial review. Okay. This is the every 4 years review under section 16E. If I could direct your attention, we discussed the quadrennial review at our meeting, if you want to make a note, on November 13, 2019. I also did a memo for the board back in January. We discussed it at the January 29th, 2020 meeting. The elements of quadrennial review are the salary schedules, the classification schedules, and town policies. So next time we meet, we'll look at the board policies. There's only 3 of them. They're in the packet. Regarding the classification and salary schedule study. So the classification schedule is whether or not we want to go, and you can look at the discussion from November 13, 2019, whether or not we want to look at changes in the classification system. The review of the salary study has 2 components. One is internal, one is external. The internal component of the salary study is looking at what we're paying folks currently, and that dovetails with the MEPA review. And as we previously discussed, that is being done in-house. However, there's also the external component. Are we keeping competitive with other cities and towns? That's the comparable study. That's something that we have hired a consultant to look at in the past. When we did the part-time, and I'm sorry I'm talking so fast, but I know folks need to get going. When we did the part-time schedule, it was commissioned in 2017. It wasn't wrapped until 2019, somewhere in that time frame. I think this was commissioned. I'm the only person who was on the board at the time it was commissioned. We asked Jo Ellen to look at the part-time positions. You're familiar with that because most of you are on the board 2 years later when that wrapped up. But the part-time study also included a request that she analyze and update the salary ranges in Schedule A. And that wasn't actually included in the part-time study when she published it. And Vanessa advised that it was a separate memo. And I put that in your packet, but I'm not sure that it answers the questions. Did I put that in the packet? Hang on. I got so many papers here, things I want to talk about. And I'm not sure I put it in the packet. Yes, I did. Hang on. I'll get you a reference. So I'm looking at page 37 in the packet. So this is the part of the Schedule C study that's supposedly related to reviewing the salaries in Schedule A. So there was 2 parts to what we asked the consultant to do, Schedule C and Schedule A. And this memo that is in your file at page 37 is what Vanessa gave me that was supposedly Jo Ellen's review of the Schedule A salaries. But if you look at it, it's really not a salary survey. It doesn't pertain at all except to salaries overall. So the question for the board, is this good enough for an external? This survey was done in 2017. Does this suffice for a quadrennial review, or do you feel that you need to get salary external data while we're doing our internal salary study? Questions? Is that clear?
I'm missing pages in my packet then, because I only go up.
I only have 33 pages.
I only go up to page 33, so I'm missing something.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Nope.
it ends at Bates 33.
All right. It's 37 in a different packet.
Oh,
I pulled it out and didn't include it. Okay. I'm going to include, we've got it's too important, I think, for me to just go so fast over this. So if you would all take a look at the board discussion on the quadrennial review, November 13th, 2019, lines 62 and 91 of the minutes, and I will include, I apologize, I did not include this. I will include the original proposal to the consultant and the data that she turned back on full-time salaries. And the board can discuss in December whether or not it needs to do an external salary survey. I apologize for that. A
That's
lot
okay.
of moving parts this month.
I was missing something here. I'm like, okay, this is
Thank you.
sense.
All right, and I don't think we have time to go through all the board policies, but we have put them in the packet. And this is a question I have for the board. This happens frequently. Put a bunch of stuff in a packet, conversation gets continued. Do you want me to repeat it in the next month's packet, or are you comfortable picking and choosing from previous packets? What would the board like me to do? You want me to put this stuff in a new December packet, or are you tired of the new paperwork?
I think for purposes of reference, you should probably put it in the packet because it's going to the public as well, and they're not going to be going back to refer to things. So in order to make it easy, just do one whole entire packet, I think is the best way.
All right. Is that the sense of the board? Thank you, Dorian.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Okay, just start all over again with a new packet. You
Yes,
got it.
Betsy.
Okay, so at our next meeting in December, we will review our board policies. They're in the packet. You'll see them now, and you won't, I guess my point to this board is if you want to start reviewing under 5B2 for our next meeting, you've got the materials in this
Right.
packet. Because
Okay.
you won't get that packet until the Friday before that meeting. But I know you all want to do your homework now. So.
And my liaison calls. Mark, I'm calling you in a minute.
All right.
I'll call
So
you later.
at Bates 18 in this packet, you have a policy we passed for salary adjustments. We have at page 19 and 20, the sick leave bank policy. And at page 21, you have a follow-up email from Ms. Pasicane about the implementation of the sick leave bank. And the last policy is the tuition policy, which we will be revisiting on Ms. Jasinski's list of goals. All right, we will also take up in December the under 5B3, the annual salary adjustment. You have that packet again.
Mhm.
I know, Ms. Hale, how are you progressing on your external survey of what other towns are doing for raises? Anything on that?
So we're at a little bit of a standstill on that right now. The legislature is doing their debate on the FY21 state budget, which of course we're in the middle of that fiscal year right now. The Senate is in their debate today. So Mark and I, we talked about this earlier, and we're hoping within the next week or two, after the budget debate concludes, other communities will be able to decide after they crunch numbers what they're comfortable doing for pay raises and pay increases next year. So I'm hoping by December, we'll have more updated information, but communities are not willing to make that call just yet.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. I believe when we last discussed this, which was our last regular meeting on October 14th, you were anticipating a governor's budget presentation later that day. Did that in fact happen?
It did, and that is what the Senate, the state Senate is debating today,
Okay.
is the budget that was presented by Governor Baker.
Okay.
Just to add on to that, I think the anticipation, given the time frame, is that the House and the Senate would have just taken the governor's budget and kind of tried to move forward on that, but they've each brought forward different numbers. So now House and Senate are looking at different things. I believe the Senate number is higher than what the governor had proposed. So there's going to have to be some reconciliation. I still think the goal is to get a fiscal 21 budget number to the governor prior to Thanksgiving.
Are we talking 21 or 22?
Well, unfortunately, we're talking 21. 22, yeah, they're going to have to start work right away on 22 because that number, should be coming from the governor in 2 months. So,
Yeah.
third week of January.
Thank you both for that. And one last piece of this, when we had our conversation on the 20th of October with the Board of Selectmen, and I raised on behalf of the board that we're looking to know if there are any special circumstances that we should be aware of in the setting of the annual adjustment, and that might relate to unusual circumstances affecting salaries due to COVID. So not the usual surveys and contract raises and union raises, but whether or not, and I think Mr. Purple, you had told us at the time, nothing is off the table in terms of whether or not union or contract rates would be reopened and renegotiated, which is something that this board would want to know.
Absolutely. And I think it's probably easier to say nothing's on the table either. I mean, so there's been, it's, it depends on how full your glass is. So I don't think there's been any decision made on anything. I think the selectmen, would like to see, the full budget picture before they decide whether they're going to take any action in regard to either of those pieces.
Okay. So I think we've made it clear to folks that we're interested in parity with the other employees.
Yep.
So if I understand correctly, we're good to just let this sit. Nobody has an expectation that Personnel Board is going to make a pronouncement when everybody else isn't ready to make a pronouncement, correct? It would not be inappropriate for us to table this until.
No, I think that's prudent given
Okay.
where we are. Yep.
All right. Thank you very much. So last item of new business is Personnel Board budget. Ms. Hale asked me to bring this to your attention. The last page of your packet, page 33, is the budget for 2021. And we will be looking in December to get your thoughts on what to do with the budget for FY22. And if there's anything Ms. Hale or Mr. Purple would like us to consider while we do that homework, open it up to you in terms of what you're looking for from departments.
The only thing I'll add there is I am just waiting for an estimate from Clear Company, who does our applicant tracking system, on their anticipated cost for next year.
Okay. Vanessa, thank you for that. In that vein, has there been any discussion about a hiring freeze during COVID?
We are technically under a hiring freeze by the Board of Selectmen. We do make an appeal to them when we have a vacancy based on the department. Certainly, IT manager is one of those. Of course, we need an exception for that. But in general, we are under a hiring freeze.
Okay. And when was that announced? If you know.
Want to say
Or when did it go into effect?
Early in COVID, I'd say probably April, but I can check my records.
So a hiring freeze was put into effect in April.
I will verify that tomorrow.
Okay. Or sometime in the spring.
Early COVID, yeah.
Okay. So do we need to spend $300 or $3,500 on an applicant tracking system during a hiring freeze is my first question, because it's a significant part of the Personnel Board's budget.
It is.
It is necessary, or it's a significant part?
Sorry, yes, it is a significant part of the budget. I would like to chat more with Mark about, phasing that out or not. So if we could chat in December about that, I would feel more comfortable.
Board members have any questions for Mr. Purple about budget discussions as you start to contemplate our budget for next year? Any questions? Okay.
I don't-
we will-
Oh, go ahead, Barry. Sorry.
No, I didn't.
Oh, I just want to make sure with the Clear Company that if we decide to not go forward with that contract this year, it does not affect our relationship going forward. That could put I mean, it's a lot of money in our budget, but it's not a lot of money. And I wouldn't want to hurt a relationship based off of COVID, if that's making any sense. I don't think we should just not do it because of COVID and a hiring freeze. It's something we should probably continue. That's just my opinion, but
There is a lot of
look to
setup work to get going on the applicant tracking system. So one thing I could ask them is if we were not able to fund it next year, but were the following year, you know, can I just go right back in where I left off, or do I need to start from scratch again?
yeah, I think that's something you need to check out. We just don't want to hurt a relationship, a long-standing relationship with a company the town's done work with for years, over $3,500. I don't think that's worth it.
I think, and I do agree with you, Dorian, and not so much the relationship piece. It's just, we're going to make a decision that makes sense when, as the chair said, we're not doing a lot of hiring. So it probably doesn't make sense to do it, but then it's a lot of it minimizes a lot of work for us when we seem to do a lot of hiring. So, you've got to balance that out, but I agree, if there's an ability for us to freeze our account for 6 months, for 8 months, for a year, then I think something like that may make sense, but we can get that information.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you both. That's helpful. Kind of like my gym membership on hold, right? Anyway, we probably aren't the only customer, I would imagine, of Clear Company who might be looking for some sort of shift in the arrangement temporarily, but that research would be appreciated. Okay, thanks everybody. Sorry this went so long. I'm not sure why, except that we have a lot to discuss. Anyway, board, any other business that came before the board? I have nothing. Anybody have anything? All right, and then we'll wrap this up with board calendar. Again, we've been asked to schedule 2 months in advance due to the popularity of the chat room. I understand from the discussion with the Board of Selectmen, they have authorized opening up a third chat room for the town because these meetings are so popular. Anyway, we have a meeting already scheduled for Wednesday, December 9th. And I'm asking the board if you can go ahead and schedule a meeting for the second Wednesday in January 2021. And that would be January 8th is the Wednesday. That does mean putting together a packet.
That's the 6th, January 6th.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at last year's. Hang on. Thank you, Dorian.
You're welcome.
I'm looking at the 13th as the second Wednesday.
Yep,
Yeah,
so-
I gotta throw out my 2020 calendar. I apologize. January 13th. I apologize. Second Wednesday of January 2021 is the 13th. I'm no good after 2 hours and a half.
And we're going to do that at noon as well?
January 13th at noon, yes. That
Okay.
looked to me like pretty good timing. It means we're not doing anything the week of vacation. Folks are back in the week of January 4th. That gives us a week for Vanessa and myself to prep and get the packet done. So how does January 13th look to folks?
Works for me.
All right, great.
Given the discussion that we've had tonight on the December 9th meeting, should we be planning 3 hours for both?
This is the busy time of year for the board going through.
Yeah. It's not a silly question. It's actually more of a.
No, I
Yeah.
think it's an excellent suggestion, Mr. Purple. If we could book the chat room and book you and Ms. Hale from 12 to 3.
Yep.
I assume I watched the Board of Selectmen's meeting. We're gonna entertain this pleasant fiction that we're going to have a town meeting on March, whatever, 20th. Yeah, March 20th, which means we will proceed to wrap up our SAP recommendations early in February so that they can go into the warrant, and then wait until June for town meeting. Or at what point, Mr. Purple, might somebody say, hey, let's delay this? What would that process be while we have you?
So so we have to set, per the bylaw, the selectmen need to have an annual meeting in the month of March. And the 20th was the day, I think the only conflict with any holidays or religious observations, I think it's International Day of Happiness, which I thought was interesting. But that's the only thing on March 20th. So March 20th is the date. If the selectmen, and unfortunately, we probably will have to post a warrant, sometime in, early February, mid-February, for the meeting. If the warrant has been posted, at that point, the control to whether the meeting happens or when it gets postponed to falls to the moderator. If the warrant does not posted, then the date setting falls to the Board of Selectmen. So, I think we've still got an interesting 2 or 3 months to figure out, whether that date has anything based in reality. I think it's another M date, probably May, that gives us a better opportunity to have a meeting, but who knows at this point. So that's kind of where it is. If we post the warrant, it's the moderator's call, like it was this past year. If we don't post the warrant, the selectmen then control what that new date would be.
Question, you mentioned a bylaw that says we have to have town meeting in March. Can that be overridden by a governor's executive order on no gatherings?
Yes, but the last order that the governor did on no gatherings exempted municipal meetings.
Gotcha.
Which is why we were able to hold the meeting, again, in a very safe, socially distant manner that we did, and look at the attendance we had. So, so there was an exemption for that, but that still did not, omit us from the safety requirements.
Okay. I know, it just seems to me that reasonable minds, BOS, yourself, the moderator could get together and say, let's do what we legally have to do to put this off till June or May.
Yep.
But that's not going to happen. We're going to proceed, you think, to a warrant, just in terms of what this board needs to be prepared to do.
Yeah, I think we're going to proceed. We're going to look to close the warrant, in December, December 15th, as we normally do. I'll be sending something out to the department heads and the boards and committees, and making sure that people are aware that if you have any articles, you have any placeholders, that you should be sending that information to me. So we make sure that those end up in the closed version of the warrant, and then we can begin to finalize and develop those articles. But we need to prepare as if it's going to be, per the bylaw. And then if situations change, then we need to figure out who holds the keys to the decision.
Okay, thank you. And I guess can this serve as notice that we would like you to put in a placeholder for an SAP?
It's always there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Purple. Thank you, Ms. Hale. I think we're done. We are scheduled for the 13th. Anybody else have anything before we adjourn?
No, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right.
Vote.
All right, folks. Thanks, everybody. Sorry this went long. It's just, it's what we do this time of year. It's our busy time. Very much appreciated. Great to see you all. We are gavelled out, adjourned at 2:30